So this is the third part of our student wellbeing specials series. In the first one, we looked at the playground and how children need to feel connected in the playground and emotional regulation, and looking at proactive strategies to help children in the playground. In the second one, we looked at friendship and stages of friendships and quick activities you can do with the whole class to build social knowledge or social skills. This one seems completely different, but it's not, because part of student wellbeing is positive behaviour support. And before I do any behaviour programs in any school or with any children, it's so important we look at interoception. And interoception is the child going to the toilet, eating, drinking, and also sleep. All of these things are your internal. For some of my children, it's actually pain. Some of my children struggle to let you know they've hurt themselves. So often when we talk about sensory processing in neurodiverse children, we talk about touch, taste, smell, hearing. They are the external, the exteroception, if you like, the external reception of sensory. But the internal is really important to understand too, because many of my children don't eat all day. And have you ever been hungry, angry? Many of my children don't drink. They don't remember to drink. Many of my children won't drink because then they need the toilet and they're scared of the toilet. Some of our PDAs, if their body demands they eat or drink, won't eat or drink, which took a while for me to understand, but it's really important we understand that. So I always recommend that toilet, food and drink, that we make sure the child is doing these things before we address anything. Some of you in secondary, is this child drinking Red Bulls or sugary drinks or caffeine and not having any at school? So that will be impacting on their wellbeing too. If you think of your own wellbeing, if you haven't had anything to eat, haven't had anything to drink, busting for the toilet, this impacts on you too. Now, I was going to record an episode on interoception, and then I realised I had a really good older episode that I haven't played for quite a few years on interoception. So I'm going to do a replay of that one. If you have never heard of interoception, this will be an amazing episode for you, or a really good reminder about what interoception is. If you've enjoyed these last couple of weeks on social skills, social and student wellbeing, I highly recommend you have a look on my website. My Developing Social Skills course is on sale for this week, and I highly recommend that you look at doing that course. It is such a valuable course. The feedback is amazing. It really is just a big time saver. And remember, these are things you can do with the whole class or with a group of children. But when children feel connected, they learn better. So have a think. Notice how much time you're already wasting around social emotional learning, around student wellbeing, and maybe have a think about, if you really enjoyed those fun activities for last week, how it could, or putting in place a playground plan, how it actually could be a fun thing to incorporate into your program, doing some social skills. Hi everyone, welcome to the Sue Larkey podcast. As I always say, you have to embrace difference to make a difference. Let's dive into today's podcast.
Well, hello, Sue Larkey here. Today, I want to talk to you about something that I have observed for many years in these kids. I mean, I've been working with kids with autism for over 30 years, and one of the things very early on I noticed is these kids are really thirsty and they often just drink the whole water bottle or drink the whole juice. They don't necessarily sip it. And the other thing I noticed, many kids with autism spectrum don't toilet train, they toilet time. Now, I'm very excited. Last year I discovered there's a word for this, and it's called interoception. I hope I'm saying it right for the occupational therapists out there. So I have learned so much from occupational therapists over the years, and having worked in a multidisciplinary team in an autism school, I mean, OTs just opened my eyes and understanding of the sensory processing many of my kids have. But when people say to me, Sue, what's the difference between a mainstream and a special school? I often say it's the sensory, but I don't mean a lovely sensory room, which would be nice. and many mainstream schools have a sensory garden or a sensory room, I actually mean that every specialist classroom or school I have ever walked into or worked in, check the children are drinking, eating, and going to the toilet. In fact, it is always on the visual schedule. I have never seen a specialist classroom that doesn't accommodate the children's drinking, eating, and toileting. Now, for me, when I worked in a special school, I didn't think much about it. It's like, toilet, toilet, wash hands, eat, and we supervise the eating. And, that child is sound sensitive, so they need to sit away from everyone, or that child puts the whole sandwich in their mouth, we need to teach them. So it was sort of part of our program to teach eating and drinking. But we also always had a bar fridge, because in that bar fridge would be cool drinks, because we knew most of the kids didn't like water that had been in their drink bottle for a month or a day, but it tasted like the plastic. So we knew this. And we also lots of kids only like drinking through a straw or a sipper cup, or when I work with 5-year-olds, often they still drank from a bottle, and we used to milk in a bottle. So we'd have to move them towards a cup. So we'd always do cup first, then bottle, and build them up to drinking from a cup. So we'd always done this for years. It wasn't until I went back to mainstream that I realised how many of my children actually were not drinking, not eating, and not accessing the toilets, and the massive impact that was having not only on their learning, but on their ability to self-regulate, on their anxiety, and often on their socialization. And I don't know about you, but if I'm hungry and thirsty, I don't want to chat to people. I'm like really distracted. I get headaches. Like, think of yourself if you're hungry. Think of yourself if you're thirsty. Think of yourself if you're busting for the toilet. And for sensory kids, it makes them hypersensitive. So please, even if you think, I think this kid's okay, can you just spend a week truly observing if they're eating, drinking, using the toilet? Now, back to my mainstream versus special school look. Don't get me wrong. For me, it's very individual on the child. But it's so important that mainstream schools, as part of their inclusive policy, understand this child accessing water, drinks, toilet, and food is like a kid with asthma having their asthma spray. Because if a child doesn't have their asthma medication, they can't access the phys ed program. If a child with autism spectrum or sensory doesn't have drink, and not all of them drink water. A lot of preschools say to me, but Sue, we have a water policy. Well, if this child needs juice and milk, I'm sorry, it's no different to a child who needs their asthma medication. For me, same thing. Both provide access, because if this child doesn't drink all day, imagine the impact on their learning, imagine their impact on their self-regulation, and imagine how stressed they will be. So for me, it's a very important part of my program. Anyway, I'll let my high horse run away. Some of you are probably going to hit pause and say, Sue Life is ranting today. Please don't hit pause. This is so important. So as always, love you to download the great tip sheets on interoception and thirst and snack breaks for the kids you know. There is also a tip sheet on there on tips for toileting, which I won't go through today. I just want to talk about the drinks today and snacks and so forth. So what is interoception? Well, actually, it's a child knowing their internal sensations, telling them and going through their body and saying, you're thirsty, you're hungry, you need the toilet. But most kids I work with don't know they need the toilet till they are busting. And that's why often they ask for the toilet and then wet their pants on the way to the toilet. Or they don't know they're thirsty until they drink the whole bottle. Their brain doesn't say, hello, you're getting thirsty. In fact, many of my kids, the teacher will say to them, why didn't you go to the toilet at morning tea? And they're like, well, I didn't need it then. Well, their brain didn't tell them they needed it then, because they don't know till they're full. Why didn't you have a drink? I wasn't thirsty. No, they don't actually get it till they're desperate. Their brain doesn't know until they are desperate. And sometimes my kids get angry, especially ADHD kids, get really hungry and get really, really angry and frustrated and beside themselves. And often it's because they haven't eaten. So for some of those kids, putting in little snack breaks is amazing, just amazing. Sending them off to have a little snack as a 5-minute reward. And that's how I do it. 25 minutes work, 5 minutes, go for a walk and have a snack. So they're getting movement, they're getting fresh air and a little snack, or go and sit outside. Because many of my kids really can't self-regulate that. And those little snacks, because I find some of my kids are what I call grazers. They don't like to sit down and eat a whole sandwich. They're better off having 4 quarters across a couple of hours as a little break in their work, because then they can reconcentrate. So anyway, have a read about the interoception, but it's so interesting. And for many of my kids, some of them completely off, as in they don't know until they're starving or really, really thirsty or busting for toilet. And some are sort of in the middle. They're sort of half self-regulated. I tend to find it depends how distracted they are with other things. Like often when they're bored or sitting on the mat, they'll suddenly realize, oh, I'm thirsty, I need the toilet, because they're sitting and nothing's happening. But if they're madly doing something they love, often that's when they don't notice. So parents, please talk to your schools about this. Schools, please talk to parents about this. So how do I do it? Well, with the drink, I normally get parents and educators to get together and ask, okay, what do they drink? Is it juice, milk, cordial? When I went to school, they used to give out milk. I know some of you were like, but Sue, it was horrible, it was sour. Yeah, I know, but they still did give out milk. So what does your kid drink? If they only drink milk, parents, write Nicholas's name on it, send in 2 litres of milk for the week, because your child will come home calmer and happier. So what do they drink? What do they drink from? As I mentioned before, some kids still have a bottle or a special cup. One of my little girls, Jessica, had a special green cup. So what do they drink? What do they drink from? And to me, this is probably the most important question and something we forget. How does the child access drinks at home? See, many of my ADHD kids just go to the fridge and get themselves a nice cold water, and they just constantly, every time they walk past, they're getting a drink. But at school, there isn't somewhere they can constantly go and get a drink. I mean, I've had many parents over the years pay to get one of those water fountains put in the classroom for all the kids, but it's really there for their kid. And they have to find the first couple of weeks, all the kids love the novelty, but then their kid is the one accessing it, particularly the girls who often hide this thirst. So what do they drink? What do they drink from? How do they access it? Now, the kid walking past the fridge and getting a drink, they might go past a bubbler at school and get a drink, but actually using a bubbler requires quite a lot of fine motor skills. The kids I worry about the most are the kids who are used to what I call first-class service, where their parents always just give them the drink. They're not used to thinking, I'm thirsty, I need a drink. Morning teas or breakfast served with a drink. Morning tea served with a drink. Lunch comes with a drink. Dinner comes with a drink. So there's a routine there, and they haven't actually learnt to go, I'm thirsty. So can you imagine at school, no one brings you a drink, or it might be in a tub with all the drink bottles in the early years, or it might be you have to, go and get it from your bag. Well, if there's 30 kids at their bags, this kid has been told to get their lunch. And remember, my kids are literal, so they might bring back their lunch, but not their drink as well. So worth thinking about. What do they drink? What do they drink from? How do they access it? Now, most importantly, if we're going to up their drinks, they're going to need the toilet more. And many of my kids will not drink at school for fear of the toilets. I don't know if you've been into any school toilets recently, but let me just say, they are smelly, there are toilets flushing, there are hand dryers, there are so many sensory processing issues. Now, obviously, if this child has interoception, they probably have other sensory issues. So the toilets are overwhelming. But not only that, kids are running in and out, slamming doors, playing games. One of my students many, many years ago, who I just adored, his name was Adrian. And he had been with me in a specialist school, and I went to visit him in his new mainstream school. And he wasn't using the toilet. And Adrian was a very logical thinker, and once you'd build a relationship with him, he would tell you things. So he said, Adrian, why don't you use the school toilet? And he looked at me with his big brown eyes and he said, Sue Lucky, I don't know the password. I said, Adrian, what do you mean by password? And he stuck out his little hands to make like one of those little doors the kids make, and they stand in the door and say, what's the password? And I'm like, oh my goodness. So at lunchtime, I went and watched, and there were a group of girls who stood outside the boys' toilet saying, what's the password? And the other boys would just push through. Adrian wouldn't push through a child. He's been taught not to do that. And then guess what? He doesn't understand it's a game. He thinks he doesn't know the password. So he had never used the school toilets. So please check. In fact, the only time he'd used the school toilet was when the teacher sent him during class because she could see he was busting. She said like he was wriggling and you could tell, which is fantastic. She noticed, but he thought that the teacher knew the password and he didn't. So have a think about that. Some of my kids, because of the hand dryers, they freak them out. They're better off accessing the disabled persons. Oh, what is the politically correct term for this? Sorry. I hate it when I say a word and I'm like, what is that word? But they're better off the accessibility toilets, using those for where they can go in, because what I find when a child's on the toilet, they can actually see the hand dryer and see no one's going to set it off. They're calmer. But if they're in a cubicle and the hand dryer goes off, that can make them very anxious. So have a think about, if you're up with your drinks, how you're going to up your toilet breaks. Now, I can feel some of you parents out there going, but Sue, I've tried all that and my child just won't drink or use the school toilets. I understand. I've had a few of those kids. I've had kids, we've tried everything, getting them to eat too, and they just won't eat at school. Again, these are just things to try. But parents, if your child does not use the school toilets or drink or eat, I highly recommend when you pick them up from school, have ready for them, drink, food, straight home, no stopping to pick up a loaf of bread, straight home, straight in to go to the toilet. Don't ask them any questions. They can't talk until they've had food, drink, toilet, or one of those. To my experience, if often they're the kids who have the meltdown when you ask them a question in the car on the way home, because they have been, it's like the straw that breaks the camel's back. They have been holding all of that together till that moment. So please be aware of this. So highly recommend you have a little think about that. What do they drink? What do they drink from, and so forth. Food, similar. Many of my kids only eat white foods, eat 5 foods. I normally say to parents, look, just send me in one of those 12 packs of barbecue shapes and I'll send them for a walk. I mean, I've got one little boy, Joe, who will eat carrot sticks, and his mum sends in carrot sticks every day, and that's one of his breaks. But really work together. But I like to have a supply of whatever it is and send them off for a walk or sit outside. Particularly, because often I get the what about the other kids. So this is a way for them to eat away from the other kids. Do have a read up. I think I mentioned in one of the other podcasts about misophobia, which is actually a hypersensitivity to people eating, chewing, that whole lip smacking sounds, and many ADHD kids have misophobia. So worth having a read up about that as well. So download the tip sheets. There's some great strategies to try. I highly recommend you watch over a week, talk home and school what's happening. Parents and carers, I'd love your input on this. Please send me your questions or let me know how you go. If you notice notice that your child is in a different mood when they come home, now they're drinking more at school. And just be aware that for many of my kids, they don't drink water. You might need to go and buy apple drink juice or milk and, pop it in the staff fridge with their name on it. Most schools are amazingly accommodating parents and carers. It's worth talking to staff because, schools want your child to get the most out of their education. And if this makes a difference, they are like, wow, this is so good. And can I promise you, when it works, it's like, oh my goodness, it's such a game changer. I mean, I've got kids who are going home at lunchtime that stay at school all day just from this strategy. So it's a massive, massive impact on learning, engagement, self-regulation. So I highly recommend you give it a go. Love to see your comments or reviews on my podcast page on whatever you listen to your podcasts on. Oh, and just by the way, if you haven't tried my online learning guides, if you enjoy something like this, this is just a taste of what you can learn in my online learning. My online learning, like sometimes people are like, well, I can listen to them all for free. Well, actually, my online learning is a step-by-step process. My course is 5 modules that are all built on each other. In fact, you can't move to the next one until you've listened to the one before. And the same with Tony Attwood's. It's building skills and knowledge and strategies so that you can put that together. So you can spend hours scanning the internet trying to find this information, or you can let myself and Tony Attwood guide you through a very succinct program. And I love the people that go, this is like watching my favorite Netflix show. Or I had a lady on the weekend. I was going to watch it across 5 weeks, but I watched it all in one day. It was just fantastic. So, the feedback's been amazing. And if you want a step-by-step process, how to make a difference to increase engagement and participation, but not only that, just today on Facebook, people were like, this is the best program I've ever done. I wish I'd done this 30 years ago. People do our programs and they're like, wow, this is amazing. So I highly recommend you have a look at the online learning. It's a fabulous way. If you enjoy listening to these podcasts, I promise you will love it. And of course, like everyone, we have a money back guarantee. If you don't like the program, last thing I want to do is take your money. I'm more than happy to refund you. So I hope you can join me for online learning. And don't forget to download the tip sheets on Interoception. And if someone wants to send me a voice recording of how to say that, I'm really worried I've said it incorrectly for the whole thing. But anyway, best of luck.
I hope you've got some great tips and strategies to make a difference. Remember, strategies wear out and not every strategy works for everybody. If you're ready to dive in deeper to more strategies and ideas to make a difference, I'd highly recommend you consider Dr. Tony Attwood or my online courses. For more information, visit my website www.sulaki.com.au.